welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming on. I wanted to talk to you first about what is a line producer?
A line producer works for the producers or producer and manages the more day-to-day nitty-gritty aspects of the production. So that usually entails doing the budget and then keeping track of costs as, you know, during pre-production and production. They usually have a say in hiring people, although it's not, you know, they're not in charge of hiring people, but they have some say in it. Dealing with travel arrangements, dealing with petty cash, making sure everybody gets their contracts and signs those contracts and turns them back in, dealing with any unions that are involved in the production. So making sure all that paperwork is filed in a, you know, in a timely way. Sometimes, you know, depending on the size of the shoot, you may also, as a line producer, you may also be involved in local transportation, like making sure the trucks are there. You know, you have enough trucks and that they're in the right place when they need to be. Dealing with vendors, setting up accounts, wrangling and negotiating with vendors to make sure they're giving you a good deal, setting up insurance and making sure that all the vendors and the crew and anybody else who needs an insurance certificate, like locations, gets an insurance certificate, coordinating with the location manager if there is one. If there isn't, then you get stuck with that too, usually.
So I know when I started out, I didn't even know that line producers existed. Okay. Like I didn't go to film school, and I don't even know how much this is all explained in film school, because I think a lot of people maybe didn't pay attention or just were like, yeah, whatever, that's not my problem because I'm creative. Who knows? Or it's just not taught at certain schools. So I was unaware there was even a line producer. And I remember I was putting together a budget to submit to a film festival, like a screenplay thing, you know, where you have to also submit your budget and maybe get in a lab. And my budget was, you know, me in a little Excel spreadsheet. Well, it'll be this much for that and this much for that. And then when we were working on Sugar, you and I together, that's where we met, and you did the line producing for that feature. I was like, oh, well, that's a lot of work, but I bet I could do it. What software do you use? And then I looked at it, not for Sugar, I was going to use it for my other films. And then I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, this is so complicated. And I'm really good with software. It's so much work. The difference between like my stupid little cover sheet and your cover sheet, and then the many, many pages afterwards, right? It's detailed, right? And it's not like the software just does it. So can you just explain, because I know that, I'm trying to say this more condensed, but I know when people start out, they don't often hire a line producer, but I think sometimes it's good to just hire one, even just to do your budget, right? Like if you're trying to raise money, you need a real budget. You can't just have your little sheet you made in Excel. I used to do that, but you can't just have that, right? You really need a real budget. So can you just give an overview of what a real budget would look like compared to, I have my 5 categories and this is the money I'm going to spend on them?
First off, there's nothing wrong with just using Excel. And that's how I started before I was able to afford the program that I use now, Movie Magic Budgeting. And, you know, there's another program for breaking down a script called Movie Magic Scheduling. There is a free version, you know, sort of online version that is like Movie Magic Scheduling called Synchronize. And that's available from the same folks who make Movie Magic Scheduling. And there's absolutely nothing wrong at all with using those tools if that's what you have access to at the beginning. So really it's less, I mean, it is, I think it helps a lot to get the professional software, and because it's industry standardized, it's standardized industry-wise, you know, it can help you get jobs, obviously, help you get work, that you know this stuff. But the principles are pretty much the same, almost regardless of what software you're using. The big difference between sort of a very there's 2 big differences, I would say, between like somebody who's never done a budget before and like a professional budget. And the first one is that The budget ideally should start from looking at the script in great detail and breaking down the elements that make up that script. So, for every scene, figuring out what are the props I would need to buy or rent that are in the scene. What are the set dressing elements, the furniture, the stuff hanging on the walls that I would need to make sure are there, or that I'd have to bring in from somewhere. Are there sound effects? Is there music listed in the script, like a popular song that a character is, playing on the radio? Who are the actors, or who are the characters in the script? All of that level of detail is really necessary to capture and consider when you're doing a budget, because the more detailed you can get, the more accurate your budget will be. And also, until you get to that sort of breakdown level, that atomic level, the complexity of the script may be hidden from you. So, for example, you may think, oh, this is a really simple story. It's 3 characters. How much do I really need? And then you break down the script and you realize that these 3 characters are in 20 different locations, or that they're in 2 locations, but the relationship between them takes place over like 40 days. So that's 40 wardrobe changes. Or that, you have 2 characters or 3 characters, say 3 main characters, but then you've got like 20 supporting characters who each come in for a day, or here
That's
and
what
there.
I do. Yeah.
So, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying we should all make movies that are just 2 people in one room for the whole movie. I mean, you can make that engaging also, but but the complexity of the story is often invisible to you, especially if you're the writer and you want to direct it. I write and direct also, and when I'm writing, I'm not thinking about any of that stuff. So it's only after I've really gotten to a very polished state that I start thinking like, did I just write something that is at all like achievable within a budget? So the first thing is, getting to that doing that breakdown, and then building like a sort of what I would call a pro forma schedule, like an idealized version of how you would shoot this. Doesn't mean it's going to reflect reality, because once you get cast members and locations involved, like the schedule is going to switch around a bit. But once you have the schedule and the breakdown, then you really know like the big things you need to know in order to do a big budget, in order to do a real professional budget, which is like how many days, how many actors, how many props, what kind of props, what locations I need, all those elements, like I was saying. So that's the first difference between I guess a pro budget and a starter budget, is like, it's coming from a very atomic understanding of the script. The second difference is that I think a real budget should include everything from the conception stage, like the development stage, through the end of the project. So, not just thinking about getting through production and like having something on your hard drive, but like getting all the way through distribution, whatever your distribution plan is. And you should be thinking about distribution, from the beginning. Now that distribution could just mean putting it up on YouTube. That's 100% fine. If you make a web series, the distribution component of it doesn't have to be very expensive or very complicated. But you also still need to think about it and drive all of your other budgeting, drive your budget towards it. So like for example, if you're budgeting a web series and your plan is you're going to distribute it online and then promote it through web series festivals and maybe doing some special screenings and stuff, there's things you don't have to spend a lot of money on. You don't have to spend on a DCP, which is a digital cinema package, what you would create if you were going to do a theatrical release. That's something you would only spend money on if you were making a feature film. In the last few years, what I've noticed is that web series producers spend a lot less money on posters and physical products like stickers and posters and postcards, and all that stuff really adds up. And also, you don't have to think about home video delivery anymore, really, almost, well, with exceptions, you tend not to have to spend much money on like Blu-ray mastering and duplication, DVD duplication. On the other hand, if you're making a feature film, those are things you may have to think about, even though the home video market is kind of dead in America and North America. There are some special circumstances where home video is still a viable space, particularly with documentaries. But there are, or, again, like if you're spending money on documentary, most of your money is going to be going towards post. And by the way, even if you're making a documentary, something that doesn't start out with a script that you can break down, usually most documentary filmmakers have a very detailed outline of their project that they've had to create through grant proposals. Reality TV shows have a story Bible of sorts, and sometimes very detailed story Bible. And TV shows, even if they haven't written all the episodes of a season, they do have, like, again, a Bible that explains the arc of the season, the characters. And so even if you're not starting from a script, you are usually starting from a set of documents that you can use in a similar way to a script, that you can break down and schedule in a similar way. So those are the two things. One is that you're starting from a very detailed bottom-up place, and the other is that you are thinking about the whole lifespan of the project.